this works well today. We've been working with our software, so hopefully this goes well. I'm going to click go live here in a minute. Doing the same preview as well as the other side. Perfect. Here we go. Awesome. We are good to go. Okay. So today we are talking about disconnected kiddos. I want this to be easily digested, easily understood. So disconnected kiddos are the kiddos who are not connected neurologically the way that it has been intended. We can split them up into categories. Basically, we want to go from disconnection to reconnection, and that we can categorize them in three different ways. How we see them express and how we approach these kiddos is different in some categories. So first would be what causes these kiddos to express this way. So in our world, it's called the perfect storm. In our pediatric world, Dr. Tony Ebel has been at the forefront of this perfect storm thing. So we are super grateful for him and all that he has done for us in our profession and the training that he's provided with us. But man, it starts pregnancy all the way through the birth process. So usually typically stressful pregnancy, intense births, whether that's from an intense vaginal birth, C-section, and then it leads to interventions after birth. A lot of these kiddos have developmental delays and don't process correctly. Some it's right on schedule, but there's these things that you have to observe with an eye on how they move and how they look at your eyes, and whether they make soul gazing eye contact, whether they don't. But what we need to happen is we need reconnection. We need reconnection, hopefully from the moment that they're born. We can correct it really early on, but typically it happens after the fact, whether that's an infant, a toddler, whatever it may be. We want to get to the point of being more reconnected, connected back into a place where they can be the highest expression of who they've been created to be. So here we go. Categories. First, we call it drunken. Okay. Drunken is more of a hypotonic state. So hypotonic, when we call it tension. So hypotonic and hypertonic. Hypertonic would be more of a raging state, more of a tense state. So a baby's expression from a hypo state would be one of those really floppy babies. One of those babies who just doesn't feel like they have enough tension and tone in their body. Those hypertonic babies are the ones that are really tense, that are really like, it's like holding a piece of wood, right? They don't flex into that normal flexion position like a baby should, but they are more tense. The other ones are more floppy. Sometimes you have a combo of both. The combo ones, we call it the drunken raging ones. The drunken raging ones are harder to dig in on, harder to make progress with, harder. We usually have to uncover things. And I'll give you examples of each of these kiddos in real life in our world of how they express in a certain way. And if we let any of these three categories exist, drunken, raging, or combo of the both, then it becomes other things in the long term, such as ADD, ADHD, spectrum stuff, sensory things, whatever it may be. And when you categorize them that way, these things just don't go away. In the Western medicine world, they say, you know what, they're just going to outgrow it. But actually, in reality, it just morphs into other things. So we don't want it to morph onto other things. We want to catch it. And if your kiddo has already morphed into having diagnoses and just neurologically not being in the place that you know that they should be, we can unwind that. We can get it back to a place where they can be much better functioning. And that is what we're here for. So let's go back to the drunken one. The drunken one is typically those babies that are more floppy. Typically those kiddos that don't do proper rolling or cross crawl patterning or are delayed walkers. They look more like they have this drunken state. So when somebody's intoxicated and they're drunk, right, on alcohol, an adult, they have more of a delayed response, slower movements, slurred words. These kiddos are in that state. The way that their brain and their body connect is in a slower state, and we want to hype that up. So we have this little kiddo that we see in our office. Her parents didn't necessarily know any different because it was their first kid, but this little one came in with digestive stuff. So things being drunken, things are slower. Her digestion was moving slower. She had a really hard time moving bowel movements as a toddler. And right when she walked in the room, we understood the fact that everything is just hypotonic. Everything moves a little bit slower. So we started care. Her scans in our office are neurological scans. We do a combination of heart rate variability, skin conductance, and skin temperature, as well as what's called neurothermal, which is infrared thermography to look at heat differences from either side to see where her brain is categorizing things and where it's focusing on doing extra healing. And if they're big enough, kiddos are big enough, then we can implement another one to see how much energy and output her brain is giving into it. So I'll just talk about it that way. So typically in these drunken kiddos, this little girl, not old enough to do the one where we see the energy output into her muscles because she can't sit still. But this toddler, typically the toddler like this, what this little girl expressed is she's lower. She's not adapting well to stress. She is not, her neurological gas tank is really low. Neurological gas tank being really low, we need to increase that. And the way she was expressing it was from her parents' eyes with digestion. So what happens when she gets under care, right? Digestion starts to improve, but her parents notice that her tone improves. She starts doing things like climbing and running and being more coordinated, that they just thought that maybe she was just a less coordinated kid. But reality is neurologically, she just wasn't getting things firing as quickly. So we're clearing up that connection. Her parents now are like, oh my goodness, she is a completely different kid. She has running faster, jumping higher, climbing on things, more confidence. Her body, her core is tighter. She's doing slides more. She is just a more coordinated. She has the proper amount of tension in her body. What happened is her digestion is moving along slower. She doesn't have to strain. She doesn't have to exude energy in order to move her bowels. They're just moving because the brain body connection are firing quicker and she is expressing at a higher level. So kids with that can be speech delays, or they just don't make as good at eye contact, or they're just kind of like wobbly back and forth. And you're like, man, this my kid should be 3 years old. They should be different. They should, but this is the way they've always been. If I see other kids, they're not like quite like this. Well, here's the thing. Your kiddo is in that neurological drunken state, and they can wake back up and have better tone, better expression. And that's where we interplay with the work that we do. We increase that brain body connection, we rebalance them, and then we increase their neurological reserves by getting things working better, by working on their spine, clearing things up. That brain connection's better. The brain is getting nourished from movement and not stressed out from lack of movement, lack of positioning. So those kiddos in that category then begin to incorporate motor tone. The other end of the spectrum, the infants, the raging ones, the kiddos that could have just been really pissed as a kid. The drunken ones are typically like, oh yeah, they've always been chill, they've always slept great. The drunken ones, or the raging ones, are the ones that have always tense. They don't typically sleep well. They're typically more fussy. They cry a lot. Like colicky babies. They turn into the kiddos maybe that they've always held their head up really well. They're like, oh my gosh, my kid has just such good neck control. Reality is they just have a lot of tension in their body, and it's causing them to hold their neck up super, super strongly from infancy, from being born. Some of these kiddos will move on par or move incorrectly. Sometimes they move ahead of the schedule because there's so much tension in their system that they just need to get it out. These kiddos typically go into the raging toddlers and preschoolers that are just all over the place, and that rolls into typically ADHD or attention issues if you don't get a diagnosis. The kiddos who typically are more sensitive to the world, right? The world stresses them out and they blow up emotionally with females or boys, or physically as boys. These are the kiddos that just hold so much more attention. And mom and dad, you know what I'm talking about if this is your kiddo. So this other kiddo in our world, he is elementary school, and he is never been diagnosed, but definitely ADHD. And he's always been that tense kiddo. He's always been go, go, go. He's always been in the face. He's always been really aggressive. They've always struggled with him, whether it be at daycare or in school. But this kiddo has calmed down, right? He is still a higher energy kid, and that will most likely be his default, but he is able to listen to instructions, calm down. He is not having as many outbursts. He's not hitting kids at school. He's more balanced in himself, and that's leading to more happiness. That's leading to more emotional intelligence. He's getting in tune with himself internally so he can express better emotionally and put words to those emotions versus just outbursting. So in that category, you want those kids' tone, the tension in their body, to begin to dissipate and find normal. That is where we want to be with those kiddos. On our scans, they typically show really all over. They typically show stressed. Their reserves are down. Stressed and reserves are down, show that they're in this state. Objectively, they show up that way. Lastly, the kiddos who are a combo of the two. A combo of the two is, in our world, the most intense. So that's typically they have a myriad of diagnoses, whether they've been diagnosed or not, or parents have tendencies just by Dr. Googling it. But these kiddos is a multifaceted thing. Some part of their body and some part of their expression is drunken. The other one is part is raging. So kid that comes out of top of mind is kid we're working with right now. He has been lower energy. He's got digestive stuff. He has some quirkiness when it comes to socialization, but he was intense as a baby, a little bit stiffer, a little bit more intense, but he had carried tension more up through here with lack of tone in his legs. And it was beginning to be like this. He would look at you when he first came in and spiraled, right? He was collapsing, rotating, and head looking up. So as we've corrected his pattern, he's found his way up. The drunkenness is really finding its way out of his system, and he has now become more of a raging kid. He has now become full-blown, lots of energy, more tension in his body. So now, after what happens is we go from one end of the spectrum to the other, and then we have to find them and balance them out in the middle. These are the kids who take the most amount of work. They have a combo of those whose tendencies. So if parents, you're listening, you're like, man, I feel like my kiddo is combo of both. Those are typically the more intense cases that we have to see more frequently, have a really, really specific, only do certain things on certain visits as we move through, because we don't want to spin off their system and make them go down. So that's where our training and our expertise comes in with working these kiddos, is that he is into it and he has this big expression coming out. He has the tension coming out underneath the surface that has always been there, but it's been masked by that drunkenness. So that's coming out underneath the surface. And with that more energy, his digestion stuff is getting more intense, because now he has more energy fully in his body that is coming out underneath the surface, and he is going kind of crazy. And here's the reason, is that you can't just wake things up and hope everything else turns off. The healing process always isn't linear. We have this low function and we go to higher function. It is this expression that we have to swing the pendulum to help this kiddo find balance. And the nervous system is such an intricate and unique thing that we can see patterns, but to each individual, it doesn't always come out the same way that we think it does. This kiddo has gone down the path of being more raging. So we're calming that thing down. And as we calm it down, the total energy output on one of our scans, he was able to sit still. So on one of our scans, his total energy output is 3 times the amount that a normal functioning human being should have. It went from 2.5 times to 3 times. And now we are calming that down to get him back down to the normal tension in his system. His brain is now focusing on things that he's literally been, and he is 8. And we're finally getting after it. And it's really intense for him and for his family. But his parents are amazing, just like you and dad, mom and dad are. You guys are willing to walk through the fire with your kiddos in order for them to heal. And the cool thing is that when we heal them this way, this chiropractic way, this natural way that we do from the inside out, right? We work on things from the inside so we can heal internally, and then it can have a better outward expression, so that these kiddos can be the best that they can be. And it's obviously the best if we catch it before they're teenagers, before they're adults, right? We can still make changes down that line, but if we can catch them within that first 8 years of life, that's ideal, because that's when the nervous system makes the biggest amount of impact and it's still working on how it functions for the longer term. After the age of 8, it gets much more difficult, because those kiddos, at that point, their neurology is now just pruning things out. We just got to prune a new pathway, but it's really hard to make the depth of changes that we do in that first 8 years of life. So, mom and dad, if you're on the fence on getting your kiddos the care that they need in order to transform, whether they're drunken, they're a drunken raging, whatever it may be, your kiddos have the ability to change through consistent chiropractic care that we offer and other offices offer, to get your kiddos on the track for success in the long term. So that's what I got. If you have any questions, I know I kept it pretty surface level. And here's the reason. I, as a person, don't like when somebody is really passionate about something or knows a lot about something speaks over my head. I don't like it because I can't understand. So if you have more in-depth analytical questions, we are always down to chat about that. Send us an email, send us a text, we'll get on a phone call with you, write a post on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, whatever it may be, so that we can help you and your kiddo, or we can help you understand how it's working so that we can get your kiddo the help that they deserve. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to interacting with you soon.